Hello and welcome to This Week with the Garden Hour with MU Extension. My name is Debi Kelly. I am a field specialist in horticulture and I'm located in Boone County. I'm happy to be the person who's going to be visiting with you and telling you everybody that's coming up and what we're all doing. And it's been a very interesting week. A lot of the areas of the state I know have had some massive flooding, flash flooding. And so it's going to be interesting to see what Zach has to say about that. I know we've just had plenty and lots of rain. So um, you can ask a question if you so choose. Um, I forgot who it was that changed their name to ask questions here. So what if you just do a selection and just pull down in the chat box, the ask questions here, put it in there, and then we'll make sure that your questions get asked. And if you've got comments, go ahead and put them there as well. And we're happy to answer those questions. If you have a new question you'd like for us to answer, we'll try to get to it as best as we can. If we don't have time to do that, we'll go ahead and make that a question for next week and try to answer it then. In the meantime, what I'd like to do is go ahead and get us started. So if we can start out with the weather with Zach, that would be super fantastic.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Missouri Weekly Weather Summary. And I'll get right to it and show our rainfall map for the last week because this has really been an extremely wet period for the state of Missouri. Now, fortunately, where I'm sitting here in Columbia, we've got the sun out this morning. And if it's not out for you today, I think most of us across the state will see the sun come out. But it's been a very rainy period. And so this map here shows each point is a rain gauge observation, and these are the totals here we have from July 1st to July 10th, and so kind of a monthly total to date so far, and just want to show some of the extreme totals we've seen so far. And so anywhere on this map you see a red dot as a rainfall total greater than 4 inches. And as you can see with the labels here, we see plenty of 4 to 8 inch totals around the Kansas City area. Again, a lot of these totals were concentrated along the I-70 corridor. Columbia and Boone County recorded several observations greater than 10 inches and even an 11-inch observation, and then continuing to see these extreme totals into the St. Louis area as well. But even outside of this corridor, a pretty widespread 3 to 6 inches of rainfall in north central and northeast Missouri, and also quite a bit of rainfall in southern and southeastern Missouri as the remnants of Beryl came through over the past 36 hours. And so it's been a combination of a lot of slow-moving thunderstorms with plenty of heat and moisture to work with. And then we had our soaking rains from Beryl that came through and have left many of us that have already reached our monthly average, July monthly average for rainfall, which is anywhere between 4 and 5 inches, depending where you are in the state. And so here on the left is kind of the same map in table form, but just showing where some of the highest recordings of rainfall we saw here in the observations. And so a lot of these in Boone County. And so I do want to talk about Columbia briefly because one of the highest totals occurred at the Columbia Regional Airport, which is our official observation site for Columbia. And although it's moved around through history, this is our official record going back to 1889. So we have a lot of good historical data that we can compare that airport measurement to here. And so even though it's not the highest we saw around the county, still one of the highest totals we saw across the state. And so obviously, with that 10.15 inch total, Columbia is on pace for its wettest July on record. The average July monthly rainfall is 4.13 inches. And so we more than doubled that in just 9 days, which is very impressive there. And going back all the way to 1889, this is actually the second wettest 9-day stretch in Columbia. And so if we look, many might remember if you're from central Missouri, June 24th to July 2nd in 2021, just over 11 inches. But this most recent rainfall event slots in at second, just above a 9.68 inch accumulation all the way back in 1905. So tremendous rainfall here that set a lot of records. unfortunately, when you have that much water and rainfall occurring, we've seen extensive flash flooding and river flooding across the state to start out July here. And so this map just shows the count of flash flood warnings here you see on the map. And so you can kind of see the individual polygons and where they stack on top of each other. But look at northeast Boone County, the Hallsville area, 7 flash flood warnings in about 9 days. And so hopefully you're receiving those alerts on your phone, but if you are, that's quite a few flash flood warnings. And unfortunately, we've had 2 tragedies here in Boone County to start the month, and 2 fatalities due to flash flooding. And so please be aware of where those streams and creeks are running high. Just about everywhere in the state is good on water at the moment. And in fact, if we look here on the left here, we see our current watches, warnings, and advisories. And all of these kind of green marks on the map are active flood warnings. And so we don't currently have any flash flood warnings, thankfully, but still, again, a lot of these streams and creeks are running high, including the Mississippi River, which is warned pretty much down the entire eastern side of Missouri as well. On the drought monitoring side, this is a little outdated at this point because of the holiday week. We'll have to wait till Thursday to get a new map here. But definitely expect some improvements to the areas where there was a little bit of concern with that dryness going into July. But again, with that much rainfall, expect some improvements here. And so finally, kind of taking a broader look back as well, we also have our June 2024 statewide statistics in the book here. And that average temperature was warmer than average, continuing our trend that we've seen since February. So this was good enough for Missouri's 18th warmest June on record, almost 3 degrees above that June average there. But what's really interesting is since February, we've kind of had this sustained warmth here. And through the first 6 months, we're about 4.5 degrees Fahrenheit above average. And so currently on pace for the second warmest year on record, behind only 2012. So we'll see what the second half of the year has in store. Really, precipitation, we hit that monthly average almost right on the nose. So really near normal. And that was a function of kind of more localized precipitation in June with some thunderstorm activity, some drier areas, some wetter as well. But overall, it's good that we continue this trend of through the first 6 months, still running above average on rainfall as a state. So on average, about 2.5 inches above normal for the year, which is great to see there. But July, we've kind of changed that trend so far. And so obviously wet on the precipitation side and cool so far. With all of this rainfall, we haven't really had a chance to string together many warm days in a row. And so we'll see if this changes, but the first third of the month is actually pretty cool. But fortunately for drying out a little bit, but maybe unfortunately for the heat, it does look like we're going to change the pattern starting today. And so that means a drier pattern. On the top row of graphs here, we're looking at maps showing our percentage or percent chance of precipitation on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And I would call these kind of garden variety summertime thunderstorms. You see a few areas of the state, maybe 20 to 30% chance of thunderstorms, but these are going to be pop up, hard to predict, and not leave too much in the way of rainfall. But if we look at the bottom row here and our temperatures forecasted for Wednesday through Friday, we start to see some slight warming. And by Friday, a lot of the state is starting to touch 90 degrees. And so at the end of this period, again, we could have some showers over the next few days, but anywhere from no rain to maybe 1/4 inch. So nothing really significant. And this is our rainfall forecast through Saturday. Now I'll show through the next week. And really, we're not even supposed to expect to add much more rainfall early next week as well. So a really dry week coming up, but it's probably welcome in most areas looking at the statewide rainfall that we've seen recently. And now, if I go ahead and look at the temperatures here, this is Saturday through Monday, and we just keep that increasing trend. And in fact, by Monday, triple digits, especially in western Missouri for many locations there. And so this trend of warming looks to continue into early next week. And at some point, especially with all this moisture we've got from recent rainfall, Expect some high humidity as well. So if we look at our forecast highs on the left on Monday with our apparent or feels like temperature on the right, those heat index values getting up to 105, that's reaching some of that heat advisory criteria. So don't be surprised to see maybe some heat advisories by later in the weekend and early next week. Looking ahead, looks like that kind of warm trend will continue as we go into more the middle of July. And so our week 2 outlook shows a greater than normal chance of above average temperatures. And the precipitation outlook really looking for this kind of equal chances or near normal conditions. Not a lot of confidence in this forecast, although we see in southern Missouri leaning above normal for that precipitation. But I think the return of the warmth will be the big story of the forecast over the next week. So that's all I've got for today, and hopefully everyone can dry out. Thank you.
We always appreciate Zack being with us. He is a wealth of information and knowledge when it comes to the weather and to the climate. So we'll switch gears a little bit. A lot of red maple trees are already starting to turn red. And so there's been a bunch of questions, especially up in the Kirksville area, as to why this is occurring. So we're going to let Jennifer go ahead and answer that question for us.
Yes, thank you, Debbie. And in recent weeks, I have had several questions on why is my maple tree turning red? This actually started about the 3rd week of June. And in this area, it was hot. It was in the 90s and it was dry. And people just started noticing that their trees were turning red. So I decided that I would go out and about the county and take a look and figure out what was going on. And then I would consult with our MDC forester here in Kirksville. Well, what I found was that 9 out of the 10 trees I looked at had an injury to the trunk. So I looked at 10 trees. I've looked at more since then. So on July 1st and 2nd is when I went out, looked at 10 trees, and I looked at them in various parts of the city and county. And there was one tree that I found that I couldn't really find any evidence of a problem to the trunk. So not sure what was going on with it. But we don't know what was going on under the ground. So there could have been something going on under the ground that I couldn't see. But the other 9 trees all had evidence of weed trimmer damage, lawnmower damage, southwest injury, which is a winter injury, usually evidenced by a crack in the trunk or a split, or a canker. Okay, they had a darkened, sunk area with some ooze coming out of it. So that is what I observed. I consulted with the Missouri Department of Conservation Forester here in Kirksville, who's been with us for about 25 years. And I want to tell you a little bit more, just a little more detail about what is actually going on. So injuries, like the ones I just mentioned, cause damage to the vascular system of the tree. And that vascular system is located just below the inner bark. The red coloring that people are seeing is a result of the injury and drought stress. Due to lack of moisture and damage to the trunk, water flow is being restricted and not being translocated up to the branch tips. A lack of water inhibits chlorophyll production, thus making the anthocyanin pigments, which are the red pigments, stronger. And that's why we're seeing the red coloring of the leaves. When the trees get plenty of moisture, chlorophyll masks the anthocyanin red pigments, making them appear green. So the trees, again, have that injury. It's affected the vascular system. Water's not being taken out to the tips, and dry weather is causing it to be more of a problem. And that is why trees are turning red. But here in the last week, we have had 5 inches of rain in the Kirksville area. So I do hope that rain, and I suspect that rain will help a lot. And I just want to let everyone know that if you have maples doing that in other parts of the state, check out the trunk of your tree. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Jennifer.
I was going to show you photos. Let's look at some photos here. So here we see some photos of trees in the Kirksville area and neighborhoods. You can see the red branch tips. So in the photo on the right, you can definitely see an injury there. I will tell you that that is a red maple tree in a sheep pasture or sheep lot. And when we bought the place, the tree was already there. And you can see that the tree does have some roots that are exposed and they almost appear as if they are girdled. So that is a problem. But our sheep are also a problem. They lay under the tree. They will eat the bark off. I've seen them eating the bark off. They sometimes jump on the tree, damaging the bark. So you can see this large injury at the base. And there are some other places on the trunk that also have injury. Here are some more photos from in town. And back to the tree again. Here it is up close. You can definitely see that it has a severe injury. And I suspect that, you know, it may not live a whole lot longer, but we'll see. Sheep and livestock are hard on trees, but we need trees in our livestock pastures for shade. And these are some of the injuries.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
These are some of the injuries that you may see: splits, cracks, cankers, bark that's come off. And keep your trees healthy. Avoid mower and weed trimmer damage. Place mulch rings around the trees in the shape of a donut, not a volcano. Prevent southwest injury, which is a winter injury, by wrapping the young trees during the dormant season. Water your trees during dry spells, or if we are into drought, keep them watered. Give them a deep watering, and then fertilize as needed. And if you have questions about your trees, reach out to one of us and we would be glad to help you and answer your question. Now, Debbie, that's all I have. Sorry.
Sorry, I kept interrupting you. I apologize for that. That was my problem. So next we have Dr. Peng Tian's going to talk to us. A question came in saying that I have several flowering dogwood trees that are showing a mottling on all of their leaves. What is causing this discoloration?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Peng Tian. I'm the director of Plant Diagnostic Clinic. Happy to answer the dogwood question. As you all can see that we received two photos. On the left side, you can see the leaves showing some yellowing, marginal yellowing. Some areas do look like modeling or mosaic, but if you go to the center, it become dark green, but on the edge, they look like yellowing. Here on the second photo, you can see apparently some of leaves showing some kind of like a pinkish spot. And those pinkish spot looks like can further develop and merge and produce a big lesion on this. I would like to start with the second photo. On this photo, I would say based on the symptom, it looks like the early stage of powder mildew. You would be like, I didn't see any powdery symptoms. It just looked reddish to me. This may be just the beginning of the powder mildew. Over time, as the disease further develops, it will look like this really fuzzy, fluffy surface. So I would recommend the clients or the homeowner of this dogwood tree to continue scout for any disease of powder of this dogwood to see whether those purplish and reddish lesion to further develop into a real powder mildew disease. Like this one, I think I can see some type of the whitish things growing out. So with this type of weather, rainy and the cool weather, you may see more and more powder mildew showing up. But like we have heard about the weather condition in the next few weeks with the high temperature and potentially dry weather, the development of disease may be slowing down. So I would say for those lesions, there's no need to spray at this moment. I would suggest a client to continue to monitor the development of symptoms. Now let's go back to the first one. I did some research. There are rarely any reports about dogwood virus problem. I found a kind of like 1980s reports for mosaic virus on dogwood, but I didn't see any report in the recent publications. So I would say I would be more conservative for saying this is could be virus problem. I'm more concerned about the yellowish edge, which may be resulted from either nutrition or any other environmental stress, or just like Jennifer mentioned, maybe there's something wrong with the trunk or with the base of trunk or even the roots. So soil testing will be an indicator to tell whether this tree is suffering any nutrition deficiency. And again, I would recommend the client to continue to pay attention to those further development of the yellow edge, whether it can further develop into some like lesions or necrotic area. And if it's a fungal pathogen, normally it will show up under certain favorable condition. With that, actually, it's good for us to identify that. But at this stage, I don't think it's viral. I think it's more abiotic, which is non-living factors or environmental stress. That's all I have, and I will encourage a client to let me know if he or she has more questions regarding this dogwood plant. Thank you. Back to you, Debbie.
Thank you, Peng. Appreciate that. Dogwoods are a very special tree in Missouri, of course, as you know, being the state tree. So we're going to go back with Jennifer. Jennifer is going to talk to us about staking cut flowers. And a lot of our flowers that we like to use have long stems, and a lot of times they'll topple over. So I'm interested in hearing what she has to say about this.
Thank you, Debbie. Well, I grow a lot of cut flowers. I love cut flowers, and gladiolas are one of my favorites, but I like to grow cosmos and zinnias. And this year I'm growing delphinium and belle of Ireland for the first time. So each year I try to grow something different along with the old favorites. But I do hear from some of our clients that they don't always like to grow some of the cut flowers I like to grow because they fall over and they get frustrated. I hear, I don't like to grow gladiolas, or I don't like gladiolas. They fall over. And even I've heard that with sunflowers. Sunflowers get heavy and they topple over. So what can you do? They definitely need staking. Okay. So this is a photo from my gladiolus rows a few years ago. This is not this year's, but they lean, they fall over, but I still love them. They're beautiful. But why do we need to stake a cut flower? Well, we all prefer that cut flowers keep for days rather than a few hours. So if we can get 10 days out of some of our cut flowers or even longer, that's great. You know, I don't like it when I pick a cut flower and a few hours or even just a couple days later, they're dead already. So flowers need to withstand being cut from the plant. They need to retain their freshness and their beauty for an extended period of time. We want flowers with strong, sturdy stems because they're better able to withstand being cut and arranged in vases without wilting prematurely. And then staking and netting helps these flowers grow strong stems. So here's my poor attempt at staking cut flowers this year. And I do try new things every year, and some years it's a failure, and then other years I have better luck. So this year I'm using some string and these wooden stakes, but as you can see, it's not the best attempt at it. But 2 weeks ago, I took my Garden and Grow kids, which is my youth garden program kids, to the home garden of one of the best gardeners in Kirksville. And he had a wonderful example of how to stake gladiolus. So you see here how he has grown the gladiolus in a row. He has some fence posts, and he has that string on there really tight. And that is how, going forward, I'm going to stake gladiolus. Now, in the photo on the right, you can see a tall orange gladiolus that he left, and you can see he's left that red one too. I like to cut them. I love to cut them and put them in my house or bring them to the extension office or give them away. But you can see that as they grow and get tall, they will start to bend. So you can see that orange one is bending a bit. So he probably could go even higher and add a fourth string to that. But I will say this is the best staking method I have seen in my time here with Extension. And I'm going to do it how he has done it. And I recommend to all of you, if you're growing glads, to try this method, because look how straight those leaves are. And look at that red gladiolus there. It is just, it's beautiful. So great way to staking. And that is why I do garden tours at his house with my Garden and Grow kids, as well as my Master Gardener classes. He really knows how to grow a lot of productive plants. You can use netting. I do work with some cut flower growers in the counties I serve, and a lot of them do use netting. So that is another great way to keep your plants growing straight and upright and have thick, sturdy stems. You can order that netting from a garden supply company. And I thought I'd also talk a little bit about harvesting. I love to go out and harvest the flowers. Early morning is the best, although I will admit I do cut flowers in the evening after work as the sun is going down. The temperature is lower in the morning and evening. They have higher water content in the morning. I always cut them at a slant rather than straight. So I cut at a slant because that will help them absorb water better. You want to remove the foliage that will be below the water line, because it will decay and it will encourage bacterial growth. So make sure that no foliage is in that water. When you're cutting, you want to place them in a clean bucket of clean water or a vase. And if you're going to cut several flowers, you're going to be out there for a while. Place the flowers that you've cut into the shade while you go back and cut some more. And then when you come indoors, recut those stems. Always keep those cut flowers away from fruit, because we've talked in other programs how fruit gives off ethylene, a ripening hormone that will cause your flowers to deteriorate faster. So keep it away from your bowl of fruit. And this time of the year, a lot of us have fruit on the counter that we are enjoying, like peaches and cantaloupe and other types of fruits and apples. So keep your flowers away from the fruit. And the most important thing is, enjoy cutting them and enjoy arranging them and just enjoy the beauty of the cut flowers. And here are a few flowers that I grow. So I like to grow flowers from April through October. So I plant bulb flowers in the fall, and I just started growing more hyacinths than in the past. And you can see in that middle photo, I have some hyacinths. They have a wonderful smell, and I do like to use them as a cut flower. I also cut a lot of tulips and daffodils in the springtime. And then as we go into mid to late spring, there's other flowers that come into bloom. And then I have flowers in June. And again, I have flowers all the way through October. And just to tell you what some of these others are, the first one here, this orange one, is a snapdragon. It's a more of a ruffled snapdragon. This is the first year I've grown it. Again, I like to grow different things every year and try new things. So that's a ruffled snapdragon. I found it actually as a transplant at a local garden center. And then on the right, that is Lisianthus. I love Lisianthus. I've been growing that for a few years. That is a very slow one to get started from seed. So I don't grow it from seed. I actually buy it from growers around the Kirksville area that started themselves from seed in January. So if you want to start Lisianthus from seed, you do have to start in January. And then often during the summer months, my sunroom looks like a floral shop. And I actually love that look. I love the look of the floral shop in there. Maybe not so much my husband and boys, but I love looking at all the different flowers from my garden. And I use some different containers. Here you see I used this tin or aluminum looking little pitcher there. Here's a pink pitcher. So I do like to experiment with the vases, and you want to make sure that you are putting your flowers in the appropriate size vase. Gladiolus will need a tall vase. Some of the other flowers will need shorter vases. But I love even using things like ornamental grasses and just things with interest to add filler. Here are some other, some more gladiolus and other flowers. I do like to add sunflowers to arrangements and zinnias. I love zinnias. Who doesn't love a pretty zinnia during the summer months? And they last so long. I can get 3 weeks out of a zinnia. And that concludes my program here on cut flowers.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I remember last year seeing all your beautiful gladiola pictures, and it's probably one of my favorite flowers, but I don't have a place to be able to grow them where I'm living, especially right now. And I just love seeing all your cut flowers. So thank you for showing us them again. I appreciate
You are
that.
welcome.
So what I'd like to do now is switch gears just a little bit. Last week I had talked about can you use soapy water as an insecticide and create your own insecticidal soap? And the answer was yes, you could do that, but there were some things to think about. And then this week I said I would go into a little bit more detail about it as well. And I found even some more information. So I'm going to actually do a third part to this next week. So the real question is, are all the soaps the same in making your own insecticidal soap? So most of this information that I have here, I kind of gleaned from Dr. Raymond Cloyd. He is retired horticulturalist with Kansas State University. And so he's got some really good information, and Gwen will drop into the chat box this particular publication, which I hope that you all will definitely go see, and I'll explain why towards the end. So let's step backwards a little bit and talk about insecticidal soaps. An insecticidal soap is really something that is biorational, or essentially what that means is that it's a reduced risk type of an insecticide. It will leave minimal residue on the plant and on the ground. It is also less toxic to us as humans. It is very short-lived in the environment. And it does degrade very rapidly. So you need to make sure that you're aware of these things when you're using insecticidal soap, which means you have to probably use them more frequently than you would if you were using a regular insecticide. So what is actually a soap? A soap is a substance derived from the activity of an alkali, such as a sodium, which is what we're going to find when you take and you have hard soap, like a bar of soap. Or it's got an alkali that's going to be potassium, which is going to be your soft soap, which are going to be your liquids. And those are then a hydroxide on a fat. A lot of chemistry here, and I'm not a big fan of chemistry, but we have to talk about this to understand the differences of the soaps. So a general term for the salts of fatty acids is what really a soap is going to be. The fats then are a blend of particular fatty acid chain lengths, and they can come from fish, they can come from whale, vegetable, corn, coconut, linseed, and soybean. All of those can be oils that are added to the making of soap, which actually creates those fatty acids. So the oil is going to be those fatty acids. So when we're looking at this, the active ingredient in a purchased over-the-counter EPA regulated insecticidal soap is going to have as an active ingredient potassium salts of fatty acid. And as you can see here on this particular picture of one that is purchased over the counter, it has potassium salts of fatty acids. And so 49.52% of the contents of this particular container is going to be the potassium salts of fatty acids. And that means it's going to have the soap in it. Most of these are going to be used on soft-bodied insects and on mites, which include the aphid scales, mealybugs, thrips, whiteflies, the two-spotted spider mite, and the Tetranicus urticae. If your Latin is much better than mine, go ahead and try to pronounce it. It's really good on nymphs, which is going to be this very small beginning stages of some of the different insects. It's also good on larvae, the caterpillar, the larva, as well as crawlers. The crawlers are going to be associated with mites. And so the insecticidal soaps are good for those. So just as a kind of a review, but the fatty acids is what is of interest. So the mode of action for the insecticidal soaps, it's not really well documented with a bunch of research. There is some, but they haven't done much. They can't really tell. What they actually believe is 3 different modes of action. Modes of actions mean how does it actually cause damage to those insects. So the mode of action, those fatty acids are going to penetrate through the insect's outer covering, the shell or the cuticle of that particular insect. And it's going to disrupt those cells, could burst those cells, making them open to the air, the environment, and potentially drying out the insect where it will actually dehydrate. They also think it could be an insect growth regulator that might be part of the chain of those fatty acids that will actually inhibit the growth when an insect goes through complete metamorphosis. So it will have an egg, it'll move into a larva or a caterpillar, it will become some sort of a chrysalis, and then it will come out as a caterpillar or a butterfly. And so during that metamorphosis stage, it actually inhibits the growth of that next phase of the insect. They also think that it could be that it blocks the spiracles of an insect. So here we see a larva, an insect larva, and these the circle here, and if you look at all of those are called spiracles. Spiracles are actually how an insect is going to breathe, because it doesn't have a nose like us with humans on its face. But this is how an insect will breathe. So if you cover the insect with the insecticidal soap and you cover it, which we always say, make sure you cover the insect completely, because they're not sure which of these 3 different methods are going to be the ones that mode of action that's going to cause damage to that insect. So you want to cover all of those spiracles if at all possible. So the real question then boils down to is, are all fatty acids the same? And the answer is no. More insect and mite activity occur when composed of long chain fatty acids. So they have to have a chain of 10 to 18 carbon chains. That's when they actually affect the insect itself. Soaps with a shorter chain of fatty acids, 9 carbon chains or less, are less active as an insecticide. So again, depending upon the fatty acids that are in the soap will make a difference on whether it's a stronger effect on the insects or a lesser effect on the insects. So the type of fatty acid chain, as far as each soap, we don't know what they are, because they are not a registered EPA product. Soaps, our bar soaps and our liquid soaps, are not intended by the manufacturers to be used as an insecticide. So EPA doesn't regulate them, so therefore EPA does not know what kind of fatty acid chains each of those different soaps contain. So the ones that we see here are the ones that are most prominently used for insecticidal soaps, the Palmolive, Ivory, Joy, and Dawn. There are a few others that are listed in that publication from Dr. Cloyd, and each of these will have a different type and effect on different insects. It's really interesting, and what people predominantly believe is that Dawn is the best soap to use for insecticidal soap. But in that article that Gwen's going to drop into the chat box, it lists these different soaps, liquid soaps, and they say in that article what they believe which insects each of those different soaps have a bigger effect on than the others. And that's why I hope that you will grab that link and read through it. So we have to also be careful with when we're talking about insecticidal soaps. Again, The soaps are not registered with EPA. So you have to remember that soaps are designed to cut grease. They're not designed to kill insects. If you think of our dishwashing soaps. We have to also know and realize that the type of fatty acid chain is unknown to us when we're using it as an insecticide. We have to remember that some of those fatty acids, depending upon if they're a long chain or a short chain, can actually solidify. It's not that they become like a hard soap, but they actually will solidify in a chemical fashion when we're using hard water, and then they're becoming less effective as those fatty acids might chemically solidify. So we have to be careful when we're using the insecticidal soaps. We have to understand that if there is a waxy leaf type of a plant, that a lot of times, because remember, soaps cut grease, that wax could be affected because of that action of the cutting of the grease. So be careful when you're applying to leaves that are waxy. Plants with pubescent leaves, pubescent means hairy leaves, may be more susceptible to damage than even the waxy leaf types of plants. And so again, these types of insecticidal soaps can cause phytotoxicity, and phytotoxicity means that they're just going to cause some sort of a damage to the plant of some sort due to environmental conditions. So it might be very warm out, it might be really sunny out, and there's not a lot of research of understanding why there might be damage to some of these different plants. And then here is one, and I did a deep search trying to find a plant that had damage from a homemade insecticidal soap, and I believe that this is one of those that had some damage from that. It came from University of Nebraska, Lincoln. And that's all that I have for this. And so I say thank you for listening. And next week, I'll have a little bit more information about these topics. All right, so let's see. Coming up next, a lot of us may or may not know what edamame is. My son likes edamame, and he buys it and likes to eat it. It's not one of my favorite vegetables, but I will eat it if it's mixed in with some of the different dishes that it can be mixed into. So Todd, go ahead and talk to us about edamame.
Well, hi, everybody. So edamame, let's see if I can, there we go, is a soybean. It's an edible soybean, and it is unlike the soybeans that you see growing in the fields here in Missouri, but yet it is the same type of soybean. When I say it's different, what you see growing in the fields are oilseed soybeans, which are crushed to produce soybean oil, and the meal after being crushed is used for livestock feed. The edamame soybean is a soybean that you would eat fresh, either raw or cooked. You can eat it in the pod or outside the pod. So really, what is edamame? So it is a soybean, again, that has been bred for direct consumption. And so like sweet corn, popcorn, or field corn, there are just different types of soybeans for different use purposes. For another example, if you like tofu, that is actually a different type of soybean than edamame or the oilseed soybeans. Yeah, edamame can be eaten fresh. It can be cooked, it can be processed or frozen for later use. And it's pretty easy to grow in your garden. And you'll notice here, these pods that are on this picture here, these are the soybean edamame pods. And they're not quite ready for picking yet, but you can see them. They're pretty, just like a green bean. There's quite a few of them on the stem. It's a highly nutritious food source. You can see here, if you look at the fiber and the protein content, like oilseed protein, soybeans, it has a very high protein content. Now, one thing about soybeans is that they are light day length dependent plants, and they flower when the days shorten. So I have some growing here at my house that basically did most of their flowering last week. I looked this morning and I saw 1 or 2 flowers out there, but they're starting to go into pod development now. So they have these small purplish type flowers, and they do not necessarily need anything to pollinate them. They will, although there are pollinators that go and enjoy having soybean pollen. They are a legume, just like green beans, and they will fix atmospheric nitrogen when the seed is inoculated with the appropriate inoculant. So the appropriate inoculant in this case is Rhizobium japonicum. What you won't necessarily see that term, but what you may see is a packet of inoculant. Now, you're not going to find that inoculant everywhere, but if you go to one of the farm seed stores, I'll say like MFA or Cenex, they will have soybean inoculant, and the inoculant that you would use on edamame is the same inoculant you would use on oilseed soybeans at the farmer's plant. And that bag of inoculant is going to look something like this little bag in the upper left corner. It is a peat-based material, and you just sprinkle it on the seed. Some people like to wet the seed or use milk to wet the seed with, and then they put their inoculant on. That's not necessary. You can get by with just sprinkling it on the seed and making sure that some is there when it goes into the row. When do we plant it? Preferably on or about May 1st or a little bit thereafter. We want soil temperatures to be about 60 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. As you can see in the picture of the bean seed, it's not coated. There's no coating on that seed. So therefore, it doesn't do well under cool soil conditions, especially if they're damp or wet, because that's when the fungus, they are susceptible to fungal diseases like damping off. And so therefore you may not get a good stand if you plant them in too cool or too wet a soil. Now, an interesting article I found was that they could be started indoors and transplanted outdoors for earlier harvests. Using row covers would prevent them from having frost damage. And if you wanted to have a spaced out harvest interval, starting some of those inside would end up getting you to healthier, larger plants that would produce edamame earlier, and then you can plant some more outside for later season harvests. And this link that you see here will take you to a publication from the University of Kentucky, which does talk about edamame. When you sow your seed, sow it in a row 2 to 4 inches apart, and sow it as shallow as you can. Now, I have seen several different planting depths. 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep is one, and that was from Washington State University. I've also seen, like in Ohio, it might be 1 inch deep. So the point is, don't plant them too deep. They are really not that vigorous a seed, so deeper plantings result in fewer plants emerging. Now, one thing to consider, though, when you think about planting depth is to ensure that you know what your soil is. You're going to plant, if you have a sandy type soil, you want to plant a little deeper because you want to make sure that you have moisture. And that's the other factor. If you can water the seed regularly, you can plant more shallowly. If you cannot, plant a little bit deeper, but no more than about 1 inch deep. And then inoculate that seed with the soybean inoculant before planting. And this picture here shows you beans that were not inoculated versus beans that have been. And you see these roots, how they're bare and the plants are more yellow. These ball-looking things are called nodules. And these nodules are what the bacteria infect the root hairs. They form these nodules, and these nodules provide nitrogen to the soybean plant. So you get this much darker green color and also the higher protein levels because nitrogen is an essential component of all proteins. And we want good nodulation so that we don't have to use nitrogen fertilizer on our soybean plants. Now, we've got a nice stand of soybean plants. So the next question is, when do we harvest it? Well, this particular slide shows soybean reproductive growth stages. Now, farmers harvest soybeans down here at R8. When they're dry, the pod is turned brown and the seed is yellowish. But for fresh market edamame consumption, we want to harvest here at stage R6 to R6.5. The R stands for reproductive. When the plant comes out of the ground, we're in the vegetative stage, and you'd see a V as the stage of growth. But here, this is when the edamame, you're going to get good yields. It's still soft enough that it's easy to chew. You can get it later in the R5 stage, R5.5, somewhere around there for picking, but I like to say R6. And you notice that the edamame seeds are almost touching within the pod, and that's your indicator to harvest that pod, okay? But if you start seeing pods that are turning yellow, they're probably not going to taste very well because they're starting to dry down and they're too mature. So what are some of the challenges of growing edamame? Well, one is finding the seed. If you order seed through mailhouse catalogs, you should be able to find it if you order early. You may find it in some of the big box stores in the garden shops, but it's not likely. And it's also not likely that many of the farm stores would carry edamame soybeans. The other thing that you need to know is that the days to harvest information that's printed on that seed packet may not be accurate for your particular location. And this is because soybeans are a short day plant and they flower in response to daylight. So we know that in the summertime, the sun is in the northern hemisphere. Our days are longer. Okay, as that sun moves back southerly, then we have days that shorten earlier up north and stay long in the southern regions. And so for commercial farmers who do soybeans, we have these things called maturity groups. And they range from 00 up on the Canadian border down to 7, 8, 9 if you get into the Gulf Coast. So that there's this big wide range of these maturity groups. Most in Missouri would go from 3, 5, 4, and we may get down in the boot heel to 6.5 or 7. But what does that mean to you as a gardener? Well, the bottom line, I think, is that what it means is if you're going to plant one variety, shouldn't have a problem. If you're going to plant more than one variety, try to find some information where you can spread out those maturity groups, and that Kentucky publication has that particular information. And then you can plant multiple maturity groups so you spread out your harvest. I've already talked about some of the issues with getting the edamame out of the ground, so don't plant too deep. Plant when the soil temperature is correct. Okay. Other insect problems. This is a stink bug. Same insects and diseases that would attack a regular soybean plant that you see growing in the fields will attack your edamame. And again, the seed for edamame is not treated, and therefore you don't have seed treatments to prevent against some of these diseases. So you may need to identify those diseases and take appropriate actions to treat your plants. And with that, I'll ask if you have any questions.
Thanks a lot, Todd. We greatly appreciate that. And what I'd like to do is to go ahead and real quick, I am going to do the horticulture terminology. And let me pull that up for everyone. All right, so today's hort terminology is going to be parthenogenesis. And so parthenogenesis is a horticulture term that we do use. And so if you would mind, if Jared can pull up the poll there, we're looking at is it going to be a natural form of asexual reproduction? Is it seed germination, or is it pollination of a plant? All right, you guys are getting your answers in. And remember, nobody knows who answers what question or who selects what answer. So no one knows if you got it wrong or if you got it right. All righty. Anybody else want to try? Okay, so I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to share the results. And 70% of you say that it's a natural form of asexual reproduction. 20% of you say it's seed germination, and 10% say that it's pollination of a plant. So what is the correct answer? The correct answer is reproduction without fertilization. So in other words, it's a natural form of asexual reproduction. And we're like, really? Okay. So it is a growth and development of an embryo that occurs directly from the egg. So there is no fertilization needed. It can happen with animals. It's a development of an embryo from an unfertilized egg cell. They are predominantly females when they are born alive, but males can be produced in some species, depending upon what the species might be. So it's believed that more than 2,000 animal species develop parthenogenically. So ones that we need to be cognizant of as horticulture folks is aphids, bees, wasps, ants, nematodes, sawflies, horntails. So there's quite a number of different insects in the horticultural world where we have to think about how the animal actually reproduces. And with aphids, which is really interesting, is they are born alive and they're all females, which is really an interesting concept to think about. So you guys are always so smart. It's hard for me to come up with a term that you guys haven't seen or know about. And I appreciate you playing along each time. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and close us out. So if any of you, actually, I skipped forward a slide here. Let me go backwards. So if any of you have questions throughout the week and you would like to have them answered, these are all the horticulture folks that are across the state. You can easily reach out to the one who serves your county. And if you are like how they answer questions or how they present and you want to get a hold of someone else, by all means, go ahead. And we're happy to answer your questions for you. And that's why we're here. It's what we get paid for. And we enjoy teaching other folks and answering your questions for you. So every week we do this as a live stream, and we also do snippets. So live stream means that if you have an opportunity where you're not able to join us live via Zoom, you can join us live via YouTube. They're being recorded. You can always go back to the MUIPM channel on YouTube, and you can watch recordings that you might have missed, or if by chance you're like, I want to go back and listen to that presentation again, you are welcome to do that because they are housed out there. And then each week, one of the presentations becomes the snippet of the week, and those are also posted out there as well. And we're always happy to share these with folks. We'll be back next week from noon to 1 p.m. In the meantime, if you would like for your question to be answered on the Garden Hour, just go ahead and where you first originally registered to join the Garden Hour and get on the email list as a reminder every Wednesday morning. You can just go to ipm.missouri.edu/town halls, and there will be a link there where you can go ahead and sign up, and it will ask if you have pictures, and you can say yes, and then you'll be able to upload some pictures. We really enjoy getting your pictures because they can help us to identify an issue or a problem that might be occurring if that's what your answer or what your questions are going to be about. And with that, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us, and we will go ahead and see you next week.